Greetings, it is time for another monthly inflation update. And inflation is in the news to a ridiculous degree. It is so misunderstood and so inaccurately discussed that our little channel here is one of the few beacons of accuracy out there, because there's rarely been a non-crisis that is as exaggerated, as overestimated as this hyperinflation crisis. So this is going to be our monthly update for inflation based on metrics I've established. Now, longtime viewers of this channel know that I consider inflation to be higher than optimal. Not a problem, but higher than optimal when the following three metrics are all above 3% each. We choose 3% for symmetry. That's the 10-year compounded annual growth rate of the US CPI, the 10-year compounded annual growth rate of the Goldman Sachs Commodity Index, which prices commodities worldwide. It's arguably the most important of the three metrics here. And the 10-year US Treasury yield, which is an indication of quasi-long-term inflation. So we're going to do what we do every month and go to the official sources of each of these numbers to see where things are shaking out at. Now, first for the US CPI, we go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics webpage. That's going to be in the description box below. And we go over here to Consumer Price Index. And then among more formatting options, we choose the absolute value, and then 2-month, 3-month, 6-month, and 12-month values. Retrieve data. So to see the compound annual growth rate over 10 years, we do what we do every month, which is to take this number divided by the number exactly 10 years ago and see what the annualized growth rate between those numbers 10 years apart was. So to do that, mathematically, we take this number, which is 289, divided by this number, which is 229, and we get this, which is 26% inflation over 10 years. Okay, 26% over 10 years. So what is it over 1 year? We take the 1/10th root of that. And I hope everyone understands the arithmetic here. X to the y power, x raised to y, 0.1. 1.0235. So to turn this into a percentage, we subtract 1, multiply by 100. 2.35%. You can even round it up to 2.4%. That is the 10-year compound annual growth rate of the US CPI. And no, the US CPI is not rigged or deliberately designed to understate inflation, as the other metrics that we talk about in this video will prove. That is the latest bogus meme that is going viral, but they all cite each other. The people who have this belief in what is frankly a flat earth belief are citing some bizarre metric that says that inflation is much higher than the CPI states because the CPI is continuously rigged to understate inflation. And these are people who actually categorize asset prices as inflation that is making people poorer, when asset price increases actually make people wealthier. So these are people who are way, way, way out of their league intellectually when they speak about inflation. So now we go to the next metric, which is the Goldman Sachs Commodity Index. Goldman Sachs Commodity Index, the link for which is in the description box below. 10-year compound annual growth rate is 1.69%. Now, in the past, it was negative. It has moved closer to that 3% threshold, but it's still not all the way there. It can cross 3%, but it can also fall below that. It's a very volatile metric, even at the 10-year growth rate level. But commodity prices are the purest metric of inflation because A, they are priced worldwide. You don't have the sleight of hand that people like Peter Schiff conduct, which is to say that the US Federal Reserve printing money causes the price of worldwide commodities such as gold to rise, therefore buy gold. He's acting like there's only one country in the world, which is odd given his fund's name is Euro-Pacific Capital. You would think a fund with that type of name has a greater awareness of international factors, but he apparently doesn't. So 1.69% compound annual growth rate over here. It's not 3%, but it's getting closer to 3%. Let's see what happens over here. Still some ways to go. And then we go to the third metric, which is the 10-year US Treasury rate. This is the 10-year US Treasury yield over a 5-year period. And it's still only 2.93%. It has gotten very close to 3%. It used to be extremely low, 1.53, and has risen of late to almost 3% and briefly peaking above that. But as of right now, May 15th, it is still 2.93%, below 3%. And to give you a longer term chart, this is 1980 to present. You can see how it's been in a continuous downtrend. And for most of the last 40 years, it was way higher than 3%. It was above 5% not too many years ago. It was above 7% during the 1990s. But now it is still below 3%, 2.93. And that's a very low bar, because if you understand things like the yield curve, you recognize that for the yield curve to even be in a healthy state, the longer term yields, such as 10-year and 30-year bonds, have to be well above 3%, especially since the Federal Reserve is raising the front end interest rate. And that's a different topic. But 3% is a very, very low bar. The fact that I would even put that there shows how difficult it is for there to truly be any real inflation. So then we go back to my table. So we looked at all three: the US CPI, the GSCI, and the 10-year US Treasury yield. So what are these numbers today that we just looked at? As you can verify over the prior few minutes of this video, 2.4% for the US CPI, 1.69% for the Goldman Sachs Commodity Index, and 2.93% for the US Treasury yield. All three are closer to 3% than they were a few months ago, but they have not crossed 3%. And remember, inflation is a problem not when one of these crosses 3%, but when all three of these are higher than 3%. Then I'll say inflation is above the optimal level. And it's not in a danger zone, it's just higher than optimal. Right now it's lower than optimal. Yes, I said that. Right now it's lower than optimal because this is when technological progress is at its maximum and deflation is the furthest away, and people are earning everything from home equity gains to stock market gains with minimal price increases that affect the poorest people in adverse ways. But we're not even at this level yet. And all the screeching about high inflation or even hyperinflation is the most manufactured non-crisis you could think of. Nowhere else do I see otherwise intelligent people debating via anecdote. Gasoline prices are high, therefore everything is in hyperinflation. They don't look at anything that's falling in price. Or they heard somewhere that inflation is high, therefore it must be hyperinflation. I often use the humorous description that they're only quoting that because their wife's boyfriend's parole officer heard that the price of something rose. And that's a more accurate description of the situation than you may think, but because it not only describes how much hearsay is involved in this inflation narrative, but also the type of person who is prone to believing these fictions because they're innumerate and don't know how to look at data. And I put out these videos, and I don't have a huge amount of traffic here, but I've shown comprehensively that inflation is not high, and that quantitative easing does not cause inflation. Whatever little increase we are seeing is because of one thing. The United States has stopped the production of oil and natural gas through hydraulic fracturing, or greatly reduced it at the very least. This has caused world prices of oil and natural gas to rise, which emboldens a petro-state like Russia to take on aggressive actions. Remember, the last time Russia invaded Ukraine was 2014 when oil was high. Russia was quiet for 8 years because oil was inexpensive. When oil becomes expensive, Russia gets bold again and starts to invade its neighbors. And that happened because US oil and natural gas hydraulic fracturing was stopped, which allowed Russia to have more money for these military adventures than they otherwise would have had, which temporarily pushes oil and natural gas prices higher still. But technology, the technonomic medium of the world, is working to destroy demand for oil and natural gas or adapt around it even faster than it ever could before, because the technonomic medium of the world is also more advanced than it was even in 2014, let alone in 1979 or 1974. So this is the factual assessment of where we are with inflation. Even on this channel, some regular commenters who otherwise would know better, they read one article about how one item rose in price, gasoline rose in price, or the price of a gallon of milk rose, and they come here screeching, I heard that something rose in price. Ah. No, people need to control themselves because the media is creating mass hysteria, and none of these inflation screechers know even the first thing about why deflation is what would really be frightening. I'll even go so far as to say, if you're against 3% inflation, you are against having home equity. And if you like deflation, you also like having negative equity in your home and your house being underwater. And we'll have videos about that too. But anyway, I hope you found this monthly update to be informative. And if you like this type of content, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel. Thank you very much for watching.